This is Crysis 2 Remastered running on a PlayStation 5. It's a pre-release build, but we've played it, and it's shaping up well. Okay, so just last month, I had an opportunity to visit Crytek HQ here in Germany once again, and while I was there, I sat down with two of the lead developers working on bringing Crysis 2 and 3 to modern platforms. I was able to film this interview, and we have some of the responses today. So over the course of this video, we'll touch on a wide range of topics, ranging from how their approach has changed in remastering since the first Crysis, what sort of visual changes are being implemented in these new versions, and why is there always a day zero patch these days, plus a whole lot more. So, without further ado, let's get started. Hello and welcome back to another Digital Foundry developer interview. This time I'm on site once again at Crytek, visiting them to talk about Crysis 2 and 3 Remastered. But today I think we're mostly focusing on 2. There's a lot to discuss here about what they've done to ensure that these next two games come closer to matching the original artistic vision. I'm joined by two people today. First of all, I have Marcel over here.
Hello, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming over. Super happy to talk about our upcoming titles, Crysis 2 and 3 Remaster.
Then we also have the project lead, Stefan, who is joining us as well to talk about this. So first thing is, what's your role in this project, I guess? And because as we've discussed in the other videos, the main heavy lifting is done by Saber Interactive. But this time you've come on, I think, to spend more time working with Crysis 2 and 3 Remastered. Can you discuss what your role is in the project?
Exactly. So after we have shipped Crysis 1 Remaster, we basically decided to have a bit more involvement in the second and the third game, which basically means that the idea was that we wanted to stick closer to the original art direction. We didn't want to introduce too many visual changes. We would like to have more tech in there, obviously, to get a better image. But we thought that staying true to the original art direction is key. And in order to maintain that, we said, okay, we're going to put some people, in this case it was me, onto the project as well to oversee it a little bit, give feedback, make suggestions, and also in the beginning define the visual target that we would like to achieve from a visual and also technological point of view, together with our rendering engineers. And that's basically what the plan was for those two titles.
So I guess before we actually talk about Crysis 2 and 3 Remastered, we kind of got to get out of the way the Crysis 1 Remastered situation, right? That came out last year. There was definitely some good points, but especially at launch, we certainly had our fair share of complaints. There was some issues with the performance, some of the art had changed, things like Ascension were missing at the time. I guess, first of all, can you talk a little bit about what you feel went wrong with the project? And then we should talk about what's being done to ensure that Crysis 2 and 3 Remastered don't fall into that same trap, basically.
The first, one of the biggest technology came in very late. So ray tracing was, of course, the biggest technology for Crysis Remastered. And it just came in, I think, in March or April. That means 4 or 5 months before release, right? And that changed a lot because you need to go through the level again, through every level, in terms of art changes. It has an impact on performance, not only on PC, also on the consoles, of course. And yeah, that was a big lesson that we don't do that anymore, right? So that's for sure. And yeah, we have also, back in the days, we have invited people outside of Crytek who are big fans of Crysis to get feedback of it. And then, of course, at the end of the development, we have invited you, Digital Foundry, to it. And yeah, at this time it was just too late. You gave us so much good feedback, but we only had 3 weeks left of development because we don't want to postpone the release again. And now we try to fix as much as possible based on your feedback, especially for the PC version, because on consoles you need to go into a certification phase again. So by fixing stuff, testing stuff, and releasing the stuff with the day zero patch, it was not possible anymore. And because of this, we focused then on the PC version and tried to get much as possible done. Yeah, what we have learned from it is, first, to get also more people on board for Crysis 2 and Crysis 3 Remastered. Like, for example, now internal the art team, we have not only this, people internal from Crytek worked on weapons, on the characters. For Crysis 1 Remastered, we only focused basically on the 8K nanosuit textures, right? Now we have focused also on the other characters in the game. So overall, we just made sure that all the negative stuff we have experienced with the Crysis 1 remaster during development are eliminated now, and to make sure to give you, not only you, also the gamers outside, a good and great experience in terms of visuals and performance across all platforms for Crysis Remastered.
I think, it's well known that Crysis 1 Remastered started from the CryEngine 3 console port instead of the original PC version, and so much had changed between them. So finding that right balance seems very difficult. But this time, you guys are starting from a better spot, right?
Yeah, correct. So if you want to know a little bit background information, so back in the days when we had the Crysis 1 PC version, there was no console support, and that's the reason why we have decided to go with the CryEngine version with the console support, which was the base version, right, as you mentioned right now, John. So because of this, we have started from the console version. At the end, it was good because console support was there, so we didn't need to implement it again. So that was good for us in terms of time, development time. On the other side, we need to bring back a lot of features from the PC back to that console engine, right? Because many stuff were disabled for the console release back in the days. That is something which was fine. We just need to find the right balance now. For Crysis 2 and Crysis 3 now, as we have learned a lot from Crysis 1 Remaster, we have made so many performance improvements. And luckily, the engines are not that far away from Crysis 1 to 2 and 3. So what we have started to do after the Crysis 1 development was to bring all the performance improvements, tech improvements, whatever it could be at the end, we brought it to Crysis 2, test it there. Even then, we try to optimize it even more and bring it into Crysis 3. Especially not only from the tech side, we have now all the tech in, right, for Crysis 2 and Crysis 3 Remastered, especially then the performance will be quite good. You would test it anyway, right? And I have the feeling that people will love the performance on the consoles and also on PC, because at the moment, if we are looking to our internal performance results, you're getting a high amount of frame rate, especially also with mid-range graphic cards. You don't need a high graphic card anymore, which was also a negative point from Crysis 1, because we have introduced the Can Run Crysis mode, correct? We still think that this mode is great because people like the Can Run Crysis meme, and you have a mode to test your graphic card at the maximum, but at these days people like to play the game only with maximum settings. If they're not playing the game with maximum settings and they still have a good graphic card, right, they spend maybe 300, 400 euros on a graphic card and they're not able to play it, they're disappointed. And yeah, we also have changed that for Crysis 2 and Crysis 3 Remastered, so there won't be a Can Run Crysis mode, for example. You have everything looks great, but we will be also very performant for the current generation and all the generations of graphic cards.
So in playing around with this build, one of the first things I really noticed is it seems like a lot of the color grading has been changed, and it's sort of moved away from that overly contrasted, like greenish blue tinge. But obviously, playing around with this stuff can be divisive, because as Crysis 1 Remastered, the colors became perhaps a little bit overly saturated. It started to look a little bit less realistic like that. But I feel like this time there's a better balance being struck. Can you talk about how you approached sort of adjusting the lighting and color to ensure that it sort of lives up to the original, but also kind of looks improved as well?
Mm-hmm. It was actually quite a good thing to look back at the game with a bit of distance. So back then, when we shipped the game in 2011, I think it was, we were pretty convinced that this look is the best look for the game, which was probably true back then. But looking back at it now, we realized, okay, some things might not be perfectly fleshed out, and we can refine more of the natural look that Crysis is known for. Have more natural lighting, more realistic lighting, and therefore get a more believable environment. So what we basically did is try to maintain the mood that the levels had, but get the colors more into a believable space. You talked about saturation, which is one aspect, and we also, that was the time when Blorange was a thing, it was pretty trendy, and we have a lot of that as well in the game. And looking back at it now, it didn't age so well. So we thought, okay, this might be the perfect time to stay true to the art direction in terms of the mood and the vibe and everything, but kind of tweak the colors a little bit. Less saturation, more natural lighting, more or better light distribution in the levels, more natural contrast as well.
And then, of course, one of the big features with this updated version is the introduction of Svogi into the game. But just implementing such a feature that was not originally there obviously has a significant impact on the overall art direction. You know, scenes are often lit with like, okay, we expect the shadows will fall here, this area will be darkened. But a lot of times, especially in Crysis 2, it wasn't realistic. There's some very dark areas. Can you talk about like how you integrated Svogi into the maps while enjoying the benefits of it without like sort of compromising the look of the game? And what do you feel about those like super contrasty areas and how they've changed going forward?
Yeah, it is great to have access to that technology and also to have the ability to bring it into a game like Crysis 2. It really benefited from it, in my opinion. It was a bit tricky because when we developed the game back then, we faked a lot of things by placing additional light sources to kind of give the impression of a light bounce, or we used so-called negative lights to darken areas a little bit. And that was spread out throughout the entire game. And if you put a technology like Svogi on top of that, you don't necessarily get good results. So we had to do some refactoring of the lighting in general. And the goal was always to have more natural lighting, to get rid of that contrast that you talked about, and have more natural distribution of lighting. Svogi is a global thing that sits on top of the level, so it's like global settings for the entire level. So it was also a bit of a challenge to make it look good in all aspects of the level, because sometimes you're out in the open, exposed completely by the sun, so very bright environments, and then there's a car park that you can go into, and that's supposed to be super dark, and that is a challenge. It was a challenge, but I think we found a good balance to make it work for the majority of the spaces in the levels.
How did the workflow change from when Crysis 1 Remastered, as I understand it, most of the art changes were just done on the Saber side, and then it kind of comes over in-house. But this time, you're more active in the development of Crysis 2, 3 Remastered. Can you talk about how things changed, like how you worked with your partners at Saber to sort of like tweak the game and just, I guess, like how that whole thing is working for you?
Yeah, in Crysis 1 Remaster, I came in very late, and I had the opportunity to give feedback, but it was at a time where it's really hard to get the changes. And I would agree with the majority of the feedback that we have received, that it might not have been the best decision to step away from the original art direction a little bit, at least in some aspects. And in this case, we wanted to basically avoid that. And we have decided to do a little quality benchmark where we said, okay, Vladimir and I will sit together in one level, which was Alien Vessel, we call it internally, like the third map, and said, okay, it's a good space. It has a little bit of everything. There's like urban environments. We do have in Battery Park. In the third section, there's a bit of green environments as well. We do have the subway tunnel. There's an alien involvement as well, and that was what we thought is a good area to basically try out all of the features and make it look as good as we can. And that was the reference for Saber. And then we said, okay, look guys, this is what we think the game could look like. Now let's make it happen for the rest of the maps. And then we just sat together on a regular basis, like every 1 or 2 weeks. We looked at the levels, we gave feedback, we had an exchange. This is working really well, this is not working so well. And that was quite a productive relationship with them. And I think we have achieved something that looks a lot better than the original. And we're quite happy that we've done it that way.
This time, I guess Crysis 2 and 3, they kind of start from a better place, right? Like, you were using a more up-to-date CryEngine. All the versions sort of shared that original sort of framework, and then there was the DX11 patch in Crysis 2. How much of that stuff is actually, like, this time being carried over, specifically with the DX11 patch? I mean, things like tessellation were added to the mix. It looks awesome. The particle shadows. What's all here, and what can we expect in the remastered version?
from the art changes, we basically carried over as much as we could from the DirectX 11 version, and what we tried to even improve compared to that patch back then was to increase the texture resolution. So we went through the majority of the textures and replaced them with 3D scans that we basically created to have a more natural appearance and get that little bit of fidelity into the image. This is something that you don't notice, like when you look at a scene as a whole, but when you come closer to the surfaces, you clearly see the difference in fidelity. So texture resolution was quite a big thing. And another thing that is also an improvement compared to DirectX 11 is that we also increased the amount of like Cubemap probes, which are responsible for reflective surfaces. In Crysis 2, memory was quite a hard thing to handle, so we mostly had one Cubemap for a very large area, and that had to work for shadows, for exterior and interior, whatsoever. So it was a compromise. And now we can be a lot more precise with the Cubemap reflections. We have a lot more spread out in the level because we now can afford to have that extra memory in there. Those textures are quite big, and that also brings in a lot more precision. Like a car in the shade doesn't looks like it belongs to that place and doesn't stick out because it's a lot shinier than the rest of the map, for instance. And I would say together with Xbogi, those are the biggest changes to remaster, and they really help to dust off like that old look that Crysis 2 has and kind of make it appear a lot nicer and modern.
Obviously, one of the biggest changes with Crysis 2 and 3, well, especially with Crysis 2 Remastered, is all the new materials throughout the game. Like not everything, but so much of the world has been re-arted in a way to allow for much higher fidelity. It's a lot more surface detail up close. Can you talk about this process? Like, how do you go back to look at the original game? Because we were just looking at the 360 version again, and some of the stuff is very abstract at this point, right? Like, you get up close to it and the resolution is too low to really determine, like, oh, that's what that looked like. I mean, is this stuff that you're creating from the ground up? Sort of like spitballing, or like not really spitballing, but looking at the original game and say, okay, this is kind of what we envisioned. Or do you have access to any like old assets that were maybe like way higher res, didn't get used in the game? Or I'm curious to hear about this.
Yeah, it was we used as much of those options that you just mentioned as we can. If there was a high resolution texture available, then we basically just exported it in high resolution. For the majority of the environmental assets, we used 3D scans. You can do them on your own or purchase them online, and we just try to kind of use that data, adjust the colors slightly so it looks, in terms of colors and value, looks close to the original, and then we just try to make them less contrasty. Some textures are very contrasty, which was making the image look more detailed back then. So you could basically try to make it look better by more contrast in the textures, but looking back at it now, it doesn't really look that modern anymore. So that's something that we try to improve as well, get the values correct in the textures.
That was very much like a mid to late 2000s thing where they tried, especially using like a lot of like harsh contrast in the normal maps to give this like feeling of like extra granular detail, even when there wasn't.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's always kind of, I always thought that was very much the Unreal Engine 3 look of that era, where the kind of the default shaders with those materials, you get that kind of gritty yet still somewhat low res look.
Exactly.
Crysis 2 definitely has that sense.
Yes, yeah, it was definitely the thing to do back then, and a trend. And when you look at the vehicles and the rifles in the game in Crysis 2 Remastered, we basically reworked the majority of them. That means back then the fidelity that the engine could add to like little kind of edges that the highlights look good, and there's a bit of like shadows in the edges that was not possible back then. So the artist put that into the texture, so there was always like a cavity thing and like some lighting baked into the texture maps that is not very dynamic. It looks artificial, so we removed all of that on the rifles. We basically try to create the textures for the vehicles and the weapons as if we would build them for a modern game. So remove all of the lighting, let the engine do the job, and define the materials in a way.
That's one of the big key things, I think, since Crysis 2 was made. Back then, you had to bake a lot of stuff into the texture. The texture had to do a lot of heavy lifting because the lighting techniques weren't evolved. But as we've given rise to modern lighting techniques and of course PBR workflows and modern games and everything, the texture itself needs to be very neutral and allow the engine and the lighting to do all the work. And it does. I can definitely see that here in Crysis 2 that there's a lot more being done there. So it's really cool. It seems like you guys had to kind of create new assets, like really new assets to sort of like fill in the world details. Like how many of those assets were like redone? Like,
it was quite a bit. I don't know the exact number, but what we tried to do is be as efficient as possible with those changes. They take up the majority of our time replacing the textures, reworking the guns and the vehicles and so on. So what we said is, okay, we play the game, we figure out what assets are used the most, what takes up the most screen space. So whatever we put in has the biggest effect. So we try to get an overview of all of the assets that are being used, which assets are shared throughout all of the levels, and try to have as much impact with those changes as possible. So there are definitely assets that slipped through that filtering, and they might not have improved as much as other assets, but I think we have covered up the majority and the most important parts. And yeah, it is a lot of elbow grease involved, and upresing the textures and re-exporting them, and sometimes even kind of creating new assets completely, because we just couldn't fix it by improving the textures. We had to build a new high poly, bake them down again, and create a new asset from scratch, basically.
Of course. What about beyond the materials themselves? How much work was done on the actual geometry?
Very little work was done on the polygons. That is a little bit more difficult to do because when you bake texture maps, they heavily rely on the shading of the low poly, and if you manipulate that, then you basically create a long chain of things that you would need to do in addition to that. And we felt like we can improve the overall look a lot by not changing the polygons, the polygon of the objects, and improving the lighting and the materials. What might have happened though is that we use the PC level of detail version on the consoles now, which basically was not always the case. So lot 0 on PC was not lot 0 on the old platforms.
Although it is important to note, and this is something that's always been great about the Crysis games, is that if users really want to get in there and toy with it, you still can bring up the console, right? And tweak changes and sort of play around with it. So I kind of feel like that is part of the Crysis experience for like the really hardcore PC gamers.
Of course, I mean, it's not decided yet. I mean, in Crysis 1 Remastered, we making sure that people have access to the console again, right? And we also will try it for Crysis 2 and Crysis 3. So all the people who want to play around with the game can do it. They will also have access again to the CVAs. That is also planned at the moment. So at the moment, in this phase, we're finalizing the gold version for the consoles, and also parallel working on the Day0 patch, which also have a lot of improvements in place. But since we're going now into retail production, you always need a long lead time in retail production. Just to give an example, for the Switch version, the factory of the Switch version is in Japan, and you need around 3 months to get the game certified, and 3 months to factory, and then having it finally into a retail store. And because of this big lead time, you're working on the Day0 patch because you have so much time left from development side of you because of you working on it.
And that's part of, I guess that's just kind of part and parcel with the whole, the lead time required to manufacture retail versions of these games is so long that, yeah, you may as well take advantage of that extra time, I guess. So absolutely. People are always, I like complete versions right on the disc in the cart from the beginning, but realistically with the patching systems, it kind of makes sense to continue to integrate things.
Yeah, well, this is what people don't understand at the moment, I think, publicly, because they don't know about it, right? Why is there always a Day0 patch, right? You have so many plans, you have so many issues during development. Some are major and critical, which you are fixing for the retail version. But the other ones, the major ones, or maybe the minor ones, getting postponed. And since you have so much time because of the retail production time, as you mentioned, the 3 months, how you can do this? We could just leaning back for 3 months and doing nothing? No, correct. So we're just working on the game and trying to give you better experience on launch date, since we still have time for it. And yeah, that's the reason why almost every time when the game comes out, is also there's zero patch connected, because developers have time to do it.
Crysis 1 Remaster is getting physical release now, right?
Correct. So what we are doing is we have the Crysis 1, 2, and 3 Switch retail version, which is separated, but we have a trilogy version for the Xbox and PlayStation, which is not separated.
I guess the good thing there is Crysis 2 and 3 looking to be solid from the beginning. Crysis 1 Remastered received a lot of post-launch support, which added a ton of stuff to it, including like better support for PS5 and Series X, as well as things like the Ascension mission. So I mean, all of that stuff now will be rolled into the final retail version, I assume, yeah?
Correct. So we're just using the latest versions which are out there at the moment. And also we're still working on the PC version of Crysis 1 Remastered. It's not like we're working on Crysis 2 and Crysis 3 and it's done. No, we still listen to your feedback. Not only from you from Digital Foundry, we are in Reddit, on Discord, we are everywhere from Crytek side. Maybe not always visible, but we're reading everything, especially me. Sometimes 2 or 3 times in a week, I'm going through the internet, I'm searching for some kind of feedback from you about this, and also then talking with the development team. Can we do that? Can we change that? How hard is it? And then to bring it to you for the next patch. And that was the same for Crysis 1 Remastered. We tried with every patch to jump on your feedback. And I think right now Crysis 1 Remastered is a very good spot. What we're still trying to do is to bring more CPU optimizations into Crysis 1 Remastered. That is still our main job at the moment, because you still have the CPU limitations for Crysis 1 Remastered, and we're trying to not eliminate it, but we try to reduce it, that you're getting more performance out of the game.
But one thing I think that's changed with Crysis 2 and 3 Remastered is the mode situation. So on consoles on Crysis 1 Remastered, you could choose from like sort of the performance mode, there was the high res mode, and then there was the ray tracing mode.
Correct.
And that's gone now, right?
It's gone, yeah.
You focused on a single mode.
Yeah. So now at this point you have back in the days the Xbox Series X and the PS5 was just released. There were also not so much people who got this console because of the demand, right? But now you have many people have it. So we just decided to go where we have the good specs and the resolution for the Xbox Series X and PS5. And then you have also Xbox One X, of course, and Xbox One S, Xbox Series S. Sorry about the naming convention for Microsoft. It's a little bit confusing sometimes. And then you're on the PlayStation, you have the PS4, PS4 Pro, and PS5 version. So from terms of graphics and visuals, they're mostly all the same. But if you have a next-gen console, you're benefiting, of course, from resolution point of view and from frame rate. That is our goal with the dynamic resolution in place, because I think the game will run very smooth with this kind of setting for the next-gen consoles, and people will love to play the Crysis 1, Crysis 2, and Crysis 3 Remastered on the next-gen consoles.
I can say, some of the footage you're seeing in this video, I got to capture it here today. You guys let me check out the game on Series X and PS5, and it's very, very smooth so far, which is great to see. I'm very encouraged by that, because I think we very much pointed out, as I'm sure you saw in our videos, that Crysis 1 Remastered, when it launched, the performance was not the best on those machines, and it has improved a lot, I will say.
Yeah.
So it is nice to see that thus far, at least, what I've had a chance to play, it's pretty much like just a locked 60 FPS now.
So what we have also learned from Crysis 1, as I mentioned, that we invited you in the last stage of development, right? And you gave us so much feedback. So also for you, public, for all the people. So Digital Foundry is very important for us because we trust them and we see all the videos and it's very good content. So we have decided also to, let's say, integrate it now, different Digital Foundry into our development of Crysis 2 Remastered and Crysis 3. So what we have done is inviting them 3 months ago, and now again showing them the progress, and to come really together at the end, that everyone is happy, because we think if you as a Digital Foundry are happy with a product, we also think that the majority of people will be happy with the product, and because of this we decided to bring you on board in the development.
It's an interesting chance to sort of like apply what we normally do to a game that's still being worked on, and just sort of point out all the different flaws, because you're right, we did see this game 3 months ago, and still in development, but there was a lot of things to point at at the time, we should say. And the difference between then and the current build is pretty vast, I would say. It has changed a lot. So many tweaks have been made, and now it's actually running much, much better as well. Yeah. So one thing, though, I do want to talk about a little bit is, so the consoles don't get ray tracing features this time, but the PC does. Is that right?
Yeah, so at the moment, Crysis 3 ray tracing is already implemented and working. We're implementing right now ray tracing to Crysis 2 version. So at the moment, the phase is that QA and art needs to check it. As I mentioned for Crysis 1, ray tracing came in late and it changed a lot of stuff, right? And we are now in the final phase of development. So you have only two options. First is to adjust the ray tracing technology into the game, that you don't have to make any art changes. It's just an out-of-the-box solution. So that is first, that could work. Or second is, you're implementing it and maybe bring it later on and release it later on after the launch, right? So that's the two options we're discussing at the moment. But for PC, ray tracing, yes, we are planning it. And for consoles, we are not planning it. If you're asking now, why not? We have made the experience with Crysis 1 Remastered and also for ray tracing. It has a big impact on performance. As you mentioned, we had the ray tracing mode, which was running in 30 FPS. And the world is now also, it has more windows, for example, in Crysis 2 and also for Crysis 3. If you implement ray tracing there, we are of course also afraid that the performance will go down and will just eat so much development time again, which you could focus into other stuff. Don't get me wrong, the console version will look great because we have the screen trace reflections now, we have the Cubemap reflections now, as also Marcel mentioned, that we have so many cube maps in the game now, right? Updated, not only one for one area, it's maybe 6 or 7 for one area now. So even then, sometimes you will think about, oh, it looks like ray tracing, but it's actually not ray tracing. So these kind of stuff we did now, and the game looks really great.
It is important to note as well, I guess, the decision was made. This is still a PS4 and Xbox One game. Correct. On the console side. So even though it has modes for the next-gen consoles, this is not an actual native app for those machines. Correct. And I assume this is just down to just kind of going beyond the scope of the original project, because when you're bringing it to these new machines, there's a lot of extra work, and got to bring it up to like DX12 or the new SDK on the PS5 side. I mean, did you guys look into that at all, or was it just like, oh, this just doesn't fit within the scope of the project?
No, we have looked into it, of course, but there are so many requirements from Microsoft and Sony side, right? That you need to change your API, for example. It's a big change, and the benefits are there, absolutely. That is, but again, you need to see what is the benefit and how long you would need to do it, right? And to bring application from that old game to a native version of PS5 or Xbox Series X is a super amount of work for that benefits, and at the end the benefit is not high enough to get that benefit back in terms of development time. So yeah, there are two modes, two ways you can go. It's first, as I mentioned, the native way, and the other one is the backwards compatible mode. That means you get access to the power of the consoles through a config. That is what we are doing. So yeah, that means you just experience the game with a better frame rate and better resolution at the end.
So yeah, I mean, thanks again for having us out, and thanks for talking to us about these games. And yeah, we'll be curious to see. Hopefully, the final games do live up to expectations here. Hopefully, yeah. So it's looking good so far, but we'll find out soon enough. Well, that's going to do it for this video. So as always, thanks for watching.